anyway, it's more on the side of that. But you've been around, you've been calling games, you coached, you've been around a lot of successful coaches in this media path that you've been taking, interviewing guys, talking to guys. I think this year is a great depiction of what's to come and why the college football playoff expansion is A, necessary, and B, going to be really good for the game due to the dispersion of talent. I think, you can look 1 to 15 and you got players. I mean, Penn State sitting at 6, Washington, Oregon, like they're players sitting in the bottom half of the top 10. Yeah. And as you expand down beyond that, you got teams that can go out and compete with anybody on that list up and down. So, I just kind of wanted to get your take on that. You've talked to a lot of coaches. You're seeing the different approaches. What's your take on that with my take on the dispersion of talent, A, and then B, just the overall development? And do you think that the college football playoff is going to be something that is good for the game? And do you think that the way the season has played out is going to be kind of something we're going to see more and more in the future of super, super competitive, like 1 through 15?
Yeah. I mean, this season there's been more parity in college football than we've seen in a long time. I mean, you look at even the disagreement, but normally between analysts, it's kind of like 1 through 4 on the top 25 is kind of like consensus, and the debate comes in at like team 8, right? Now it's like every analyst has a different number 1 team. I have Michigan number 1. A lot of people have Georgia. I've seen Oklahoma number 1 this week. So like the parity is there in college football where literally there's maybe 10 teams that could realistically make the playoff, maybe more, maybe 15, that like you wouldn't be shocked if they made the playoff. I mean, everywhere from even look at teams like, have we written Alabama off too early? I mean, they're not out of the mix. I mean, there's a lot of there's programs. No one's talking about UNC. Like there's a lot of programs even at the 10 to 13 range that are still in that hunt. So when we talk about the playoff, the reason at the beginning and when I thought about it a lot that I was not against it, but just kind of like, let's hold our horses, because the college football has been really good for a long time. The playoff has been exciting since it's been in existence, the 14 playoff. That just changing rules and changing things isn't always the best way to fix things. College football is the best sport in the world because the regular season matters so much. I've stood by that. It's the reason that a week 2 college football game will get better ratings than the NBA Finals on TV. A regular season game like Oklahoma, Texas will do better ratings than the MLB World Series, will do better ratings than March Madness, everything. Regular season game, that didn't mean anything because the regular season matters so much. Those teams can't afford to lose games. Every game matters. And when you expand the playoff, it's like supply and demand, right? Like you create more of something, everything's worth a little bit less. It's like inflation of games. Like you created more games, everything means a little bit less. And it means that regular season means a little bit less. It means that, some teams can lose week 2 and still make the playoff. Some teams can lose 2 games and still make the playoff. And then, so that means that those games don't mean as much. Then the playoff games don't quite mean as much. And then the conference championship doesn't quite mean it. So like it's a trickle down effect to the entire thing. There's more games. More games doesn't always mean better games and a better product, was my point.
Yeah.
Although with this season, I have changed my tune on wanting to see an expanded playoff because I was just doing a bracket the other day on my 12, like what that would look like what an expanded playoff would look like. And it's, even just looking at the top 25 and who could possibly make it. An expanded playoff is certainly going to be a great thing for the game. It's going to be exciting. It's going to be great for the players. Do I think it'll make the regular season games a little bit less important? Yes. I think we can all concede that. But overall, I'll take making the regular season games slightly less important. I'll accept that if it means we get a more exciting, bigger pool for the college football playoff. That makes sense?
That does. Yeah. It does. I can buy that. I think the other thing, though, is you're going to see a slow deterioration of the out-of-conference schedules and a bigger focus on conference, right? Because you're going to have to position yourself for wins within your conference to be ultimately one of the top 2 teams in your conference to get into the conversation of the college football playoff. If we're going to still stay in the Power 5 with the AAC or whatever. Being a 6 wild card.
Does that drive teams to go out and play at West Virginia week 1? even as out of conference, but a formidable opponent, not the,
I think it's going to be more of an NFL model where you're going to go out and the best is going to play the best because you're going to have to do it. So you're going to get better games early, but then it's going to be a battle of attrition towards the end where you hit the playoffs and you may have a team like Texas who trips up early and then gets hot at the end and goes and beats everybody, which I think is cool, man. I think you're just going to see teams that get opportunities that they didn't get in the past, and there's no longer that because realistically speaking, past 12, if you're complaining that you're 15, you should have done more in the regular season to put yourself.
Well, and to speak on the NFL model, like you just said, Hack, there's NFL coaches I've heard openly talk about how the beginning of the season doesn't really matter that much. And the preseason's still kind of in existence for the first few weeks of the NFL season, that you got to be playing your best ball when it comes to November. You got to be feeling really good about your team. I think the schedule point you make is interesting and how different programs handle it. I saw James Franklin today in his press conference talked about there's a team in the Big Ten, and I think it's got to be one of the either Ohio State, Michigan, or maybe even a Maryland, who are actively trying to buy themselves out of non-conference games because they want to play easier opponents. And I think, too, it's the point I made the other week on social media about the Penn State-Pitt battle, right? Everyone's talking about why doesn't Penn State play Pitt? Why won't Penn State play Pitt? And the reason is because Penn State doesn't get anything out of that. Penn State doesn't benefit whatsoever. Pitt does. Penn State doesn't. Penn State loses the game, all hell breaks loose. They win. It's a game they should win. It does nothing, and they'd rather a lot of times play an easier non-conference opponent. So, there's both ways to look at it. Are they going to go schedule bigger opponents, and are they going to try to get good wins on the schedule? Because now we have the automatic qualifiers, and then we have the at-large bids that are going to be available too. So it's going to be interesting in how head coaches approach it, and how athletic directors approach it when it comes to scheduling.
I think conference realignment is going to play a role in that too. I think that's coming down the line too, where I think that there's going to be a drastic change in the next 5 years in college football from a conference realignment standpoint that is almost going to eliminate the ability for you to go out and schedule a game like we have this weekend with a UMass or a Delaware game or something. I think it's going to eliminate that possibility for us, but that's a deeper conversation.
And I mean, we could talk about this all day, but just the lack of continuity across college football is going to have to change pretty soon. One of the wildest things to me in college football is that the people in charge of governing college football that make all the decisions are the school presidents and the conference commissioners, right? That's who makes all the decisions. Mm-hmm. Those people who govern college football, the same people are also governing women's lacrosse, track and field, women's basketball, swimming and diving. There's not one person who just has college football's best interests at heart and is governing college football. The thought that the people in charge of this sport also are in charge of all those other non-revenue sports is really doesn't make sense at the end of the day when you think about it. And it's why there's no continuity. And then you talked about conference realignment, Hack. The fact that the SEC plays one less conference game than the Big Ten, that makes no sense. If I'm James Franklin, if I'm Jim Harbaugh, if I'm Ryan Day, we want to play one less conference game because we're who are we competing with? We're competing with the SEC for playoff spots. The continuity, at some point pretty soon, we're going to see the NCAA get out of the regulation, the governance part of it, or at least the infraction part, governing actual NCAA violations. Yes, get out of that part. And we're going to see some kind of either Power 5 commissioner, some kind of college football commissioner come in, and the college football programs could be breaking off of the NCAA. At some point soon, it's a big enough business. There's going to have to be a college football commissioner that's in charge of college football and doesn't have to worry about making sure it's fair for all the other sports and just has college football's best interests at heart.
Right.
That's interesting, man.
The inside take from the great AB. Giving us an inside peek into the NCAA.
Well, I mean, when you think about that I got that from Joel Klatt. The whole he made that comment, but you think NFL is the NFL commissioner. Mm-hmm. The fact that the people making the decisions on conference realignment on everything, they're not in charge of college football. They're in charge of all sports around, and no one's just looking out for college football.
Well, and what's pretty interesting is that they make some of the decisions they make. They're looking out for all sports.
Yeah.
Like bringing USC and UCLA into the Big Ten, and now, or what was it?
Are you? What are you? Are you against Big Ten expansion?
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to figure out like how the schedule is sending a baseball team out there, and they're going to have to be gone for 2 weeks because you're not going to charter a flight out for 2 times to go play USC and UCLA. Early in the baseball season, middle of the baseball season, and then they're going to be out of class for 2.5 weeks. So there's just a lot of logistics that go into it, and that's why I've always said I think it's going to be an NFL model, a North and a South, and then you're going to have 5 or 6 subdivisions in the North and 5 or 6 subdivisions in the South, and that's ultimately how you're going to get to it. But we'll see what happens.